Regan Slaymaker for Radiant.Green, and I have the pleasure to be joined by Alastair Mounsey. Alastair, how are you today?
Very well, thank you for this opportunity to have a talk.
No problem at all. It's great to have you on board. I thought we'd start kind of with JA Solar and the relationship to Solar and Storage Live. So kind of just give us an insight, kind of what do JA Solar do, and how do you guys kind of benefit from coming to Solar and Storage Live?
Well, what GA Solar does is we're a module manufacturer, integrated module manufacturer, meaning we make ingot wafer cells and modules. And we're very active in the UK for many years, more than 10 years, most of that time being one of the leading brands, particularly for the last 5 or 6 years. And we use Solar Storage Live as a good way to engage with our major buyers, our distribution partners, and engaging with the installers of the industry who go through those distributors or who maybe just want to have a talk with us directly. So it's always a great show, and happy to be back again this year.
Perfect. I'm very glad to hear it. I mean, obviously, you mentioned kind of what you guys do, obviously discuss the solar PV modules as well. Kind of what particular kind of advancements have JA Solar made over time to kind of that have benefited the solar industry?
Well, we are one of the leading manufacturers in the world in terms of its scale. So I think one of the major things that we contributed to the UK industry is that we were the first who really put a focus on the UK industry. This is going back 10 years, and used our massive production and the concept of sending product to the UK and keeping a consistent stocking and frankly bringing the price of modules down and maintaining that quality as well. So all being said, what I mean is we were the first to really throw the force of Chinese manufacturing at the UK, and that meant that we worked very quickly with the largest distributors and gave the industry real access to lowering the cost and increasing the flexibility. So that's from the commercial point, and that's why a lot of the people in the UK, have used our panels in the past and continue to. In terms of technology, we were the leaders on one of the leaders on the monocrystalline move away from polycrystalline, and we were one of the pioneers of the PERC technology. So we were there assisting in the development and commercialization, mass production of PERC modules. We're one of the ones who really developed on the black modules at the beginning, making sure that those were available with consistent color. And also in the past, we were one of the first ones with many of the innovations that the UK has done, going back, such as putting smart modules, putting optimizers on the back of modules, or increasing the sizes of the wafers and things like this. As we go forward now, JA is also part of the main pack of suppliers who are promoting the next stage in cell technology, namely N-type types, particularly TOPCon, increasing the efficiency and the power generation of the modules. So this is the power of JA in the UK market.
I was going to say you've pioneered kind of a lot of kind of the new technologies within solar there as well. And I do want to kind of move on. Obviously, you mentioned a little bit there about decreasing the price of solar. JA have been a big part of that. But one of the major solar industry trends that I thought we'd talk about today is kind of what factors do you think, in your opinion, or JA's opinion, are going to affect the rise and fall of the costs related to solar in the long run? Obviously, we know kind of the industry's booming at the moment, and obviously due to the cheaper prices. But yeah, what factors are going to affect the rise and fall of costs related to solar in the long run?
Well, in the long run, which is different to the short run or the medium run, in the long run, the increase of capacity of not just the modules, but all the components of the supply chain, namely, the polysilicon, the silicon, will lead to a cost decrease. That's perhaps that is a long-term trend. It's also a trend, a medium-term trend that we're involved in now, because there is quite rapid expansions happening at this time, and then also just the general increase of the efficiency, which is happening, through different technologies, which brings down at least the levelized cost of energy of sites going down. But yes, the main driver is the capacity available at the moment. If we look at the next 2 or 3 years and how that's going to affect cost downwards, of course, we have to avoid any short to medium term shock, and we've had a couple of those in the last 5 years, right, or 3 or 4 years, which can affect the supply chain, create certain bottlenecks, or increase demand where it can't be, such as the energy crisis or the war in Europe, which increased demand suddenly, right? But barring any let's say geopolitical or global hiccup, the trend is to watch the capacity increase and the prices continue to decline.
Perfect. The kind of the second kind of industry trend that obviously we've planned to talk about today is kind of the labor and social issues related to the solar supply chain. I mean, at the moment, obviously, it's a big topic at the moment. Can't go into it too much today, but kind of how are JA Solar approaching kind of the question of a wider social issue within the solar supply chain?
Well, it's a good point, and it is an important, as you put, a question there, and it's something that we have to address, and we should see it as a key factor in the way that we communicate to the clients and the way that we think about how we are dealing with modules. It's not the sale of modules, not just about price and availability, but also about the supply chain, its traceability, and ESG. In general, to answer your question, we've, through the last few years where this topic kind of came up, where it wasn't a topic so much before, it's meant that we have, shored up and consolidated our supplier mapping, our supplier relationships, took a look a bit more deeply at the due diligence. Maybe there was some things that weren't priority before that we had to get a more focused eye on. So, I mean, that would say has been, some of the good that has come from this, this question, particularly related to, we can say related to forced labor questions. So that's one thing. But on the other hand, or on one hand, we do have to bear in mind that we should promote, established and professional due diligence processes, which is, based on correct reporting, on monitoring, and to that end, we are part of the Solar Power Europe Solar Security Initiative. We're an active participant member. We've been involved in the first part of that in the study, and we're also on the Solar Energy Responsible Sourcing Steering Groups. So that's looking to create industry standards on things like general ESG, not just forced labor, but included all levels of ESG, traceability as well, and that is in line with, or more looking at what's going on with the EU, due diligence, and anti-forced labor, various acts and directives and things. So again, to be in that kind of world of doing proper due diligence and systems. On the other side, though, having said that, we do understand that there's reputational issues now behind solar and behind Chinese manufacturers, that customers, they just simply, just want to de-risk as much as they can. And we need to help them do that because we don't want to stop them, deploying solar and financing solar. And to that end, I would say that, the large manufacturers like JA were the solution to this question rather than the problem. Why? Because the large manufacturers, we are vertically integrated. We know where our wafer cells modules come from because either we make them ourselves like JA, or we have the power over the supply chain to enforce, certain traceability actions, certain ESG actions on that supply chain. But even if we are the ones, let's say, in the spotlight, that is fine, and it's working because we're the ones who, like I said, can solve the issue. So, whilst there isn't, I think too much need, or value to using the forced labor issue to kind of create a smaller supply chain. So, we only can use this supply chain or these suppliers. I don't think that has too much value. But greater levels of traceability through the supply chain is possible. JA is leading on that in this regard, and people and customers can and people concerned about that topic can are able to talk to JA Solar and about that and see how we can address those questions. Quite a long answer there. I don't know if you were expecting all that.
No, that was perfect. I feel like with a topic like that, we need long answers because there needs to be clarity with certain situations that are arising as well. Before we get on to kind of the diversifying of the solar supply chain, because that is also a big issue with the rise in demand of solar PVs as well. Another with the rise of demand in solar, there's also a major discussion around kind of the use of solar, but also the recycling of end of life solar PVs as well. I've done a little bit of research before we've done this interview, so it's estimated that around 60 million tons of solar PV panel waste could it be accumulated on landfills by 2050. I mean, that's a lot. So in your view as well, Alastair, how can the solar industry kind of prevent this that extent of solar waste from happening and getting its way to landfill?
Yes. Okay. Well, I don't want to too much disregard your research on that, but I think some of especially what we see in the media about the landfill issue, whilst it does point to an interesting question mark for the future, there is a level that it's maybe over dramatizing the issue here. I think if we do read some of that research more, it will say that if we don't do something, it could lead to modules going into landfill. But we are doing something. Modules can be recycled, and JA Solar, amongst many of the industry participants of our peers, our module peers, contribute, and I mean this, millions of euros every year to recycling schemes, compulsory recycling schemes, and often we go beyond those schemes in certain countries. And so there is let's say an insurance scheme in effect where it's prepaid. Of course, someone may question, what will happen, but there are different levels of recycling, high level recycling where you can really take out the components, I don't know the correct word, let's call it ingredients of the module, the silicon, the glass, or let's say a lower level, lower value, I think we should call it, where maybe it's just crushed into building materials or something. I think that a mass industry of recycling doesn't exist because we're not there yet, right? The industry in the UK is, let's call it 12 years old, 50, and modules do last, right? They are going to last 20, 25, 30 years. So it will be a big issue in 20 years or 15 years from now. But I think that the industry is aware of it. And I think that the market will see the opportunity. And as long as it's decently regulated and we don't have any bad news stories such as we see in sometimes, there was in Europe where modules were sent off to Africa, and this was against the regulation that was the soft regulation and things like this. So I think that the market will there will be a market for this recycled material if regulation comes in. I think that we shouldn't be too alarmist about this. And at the same time, JA and other manufacturers really are tracking the life cycle analysis, our total greenhouse emissions of the modules, and that also looks at the chemical input, hazardous materials that go into the solar modules, and have processes and systems and feedback loops to constantly reduce all those inputs. So it's not just I don't think there is such a passive situation for module suppliers and the industry as some of the media research that you may have done may suggest.
Perfect. So it's glad to hear that yeah, my research was a bit more dramatized, and that things are happening in the positive outputs. That's perfect here as well. The final kind of industry trend that I'd like to discuss is it kind of relates to the first point. Is kind of the diversifying of the solar supply chain, and I do want to kind of frame this question with a bit of context. So I feel like it helped me understand it, and I feel like it will help the audience understand it as well. So kind of obviously over the last few years, we kind of mentioned that China has driven down the price of solar PV manufacturing costs, and subsequently kind of manufacturing capacity have moved out of Europe, the US, and Japan, and moved into China. It has accelerated the green energy transition. However, it's kind of bottleneck supply chains into China, and over time, people have argued that it will place strain on these individual supply chains. How, in your opinion, how can other countries capitalize on this and create more supply chains? And will this make for a more resilient transition to net zero?
I think what I can do to answer that question, because we can really go into geopolitics here and about, regional diversification and the EU's requirement of diversification outside China. And I think that could open many doors of questioning here. But let's answer the specific question of how can other regions,
of course,
benefit from this situation that you described, right? Well, I suppose the answer in one way is from policy, if there are incentives from such as the European Union, and there are those programs being talked about in the EU to incentivize through various reasons, just as similar as the US do it with the Inflation Act and such programs. So that is one way that it can happen. Just as with the recycling point, I think that the market will determine it mostly, because the reality is that the cost profile outside of China and Asia, let's talk about just Europe now. So the cost profile of a European manufacturing compared to a Chinese or an Asian one, from both its internal and internal costs, whether it be labor, land, materials, transport, whatever, taxation, and also the external economies of scale, that the industry being around it, right, suppliers helping out suppliers, is higher, right? So you would expect then that if there is a supply chain in Europe, it has to be, let's say a higher value supply chain. And what does a higher value mean? Maybe it's a higher value of technology. Maybe it's a lower carbon footprint. Maybe it's a focus on, social issues, if that still remains to be a point. But if there isn't the demand in the market for that, then it's going to be, a lot of money, private and even public money, thrown at that. But I don't, want to belittle it, because indeed, various Chinese manufacturers, even such as JA Solar, are, investigating that, or maybe investigating, European supply as well. The other part of it, though, going back to Asia, is if we look at the EU, part of the diversification strategy that it does have, and I suppose I am touching now on the global politics part, is to diversify away from China. And JA does have operations in other Southeast Asian countries, and other manufacturers who are not Chinese will also, have the maybe the more opportunity and market demand to develop outside of China. Yes, that's it. I think that's the main point.
Perfect. No, I think you touched on that perfectly, Alastair, as well. My final question, and thank you for giving me your time today. Where can people find JA Solar and yourself at Solar and Storage Live?
Well, we'll be there. We've got a booth, and the booth number is E7, as I'm informed, and we'd be happy to see you there. And anybody who wants to learn more about any of the topics I've discussed today can come and speak with myself or members of the JA Solar team.
Definitely. Well, I look forward to seeing you there, Alistair. And yeah, thank you again for giving your time to Radiant.Green.
That's great. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you very much.